see, just a second. If I could call the meeting to order, please, at 6:34 p.m. The meeting of the Measures B, J, and Y Independent Citizen School Facilities Bond Oversight Committee. If you could help me with the roll call, please.
Yes, Chair. On the roll call for the Measures B, J, and Y Independent Citizens School Facilities Bond Oversight Committee meeting for January 12th, 2026. Member Butler?
Present.
Member Jones III is absent. Member Clark?
Present.
Secretary Dawson?
Present.
Vice Chair Nelson?
Here.
Chair Gonzalez?
Here.
Quorum present.
Do we have any speaker cards on anything on this agenda?
As of now, there are no persons signed up to speak on any item,
Okay.
except there be public members who come in later today.
All right. May I have a motion to adopt the minutes of December 8th, assuming there are no corrections or omissions that are noted by anyone in the committee?
So moved.
All right.
I second.
Okay. It's been, all right, yeah, I have your name. It's been moved and seconded by committee member Nelson and Dawson. On the minutes, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Chair.
Or you need to do a
Gonzalez.
roll call on each one?
Yes.
All right.
And also for this item, there are no public commenters signed up to speak, and you just want me to go ahead with the roll call? On the motion to approve the December 8th, 2025 Measures BJ and Y Committee meeting minutes. Member Butler?
Yes.
Member Jones III is absent. Member Clark?
Yes.
Secretary Dawson?
Yes.
Vice Chair Nelson?
Yes.
Chair Gonzalez?
Yes.
Minutes are approved.
As a matter of I have a general question for you. When we have the committee general consent, but we have nothing to report, can we just skip it, or do we note it for the record that there is none? What is our standard practice?
You can note it for the record that there's none. And
Okay.
move forward to the next item.
All right, okay, none. There's no adoption of the committee general consent report. Then we move to unfinished business. Under new business, we have item G1 253028, and I believe we have a presentation.
If I may, just for the record, Chair Gonzalez, that is under new business. There's no items under unfinished business for this meeting.
So can I ask a technical question on that? So under unfinished business, if on the last meeting, if under unfinished business, at the last meeting, at the end of the meeting, we ask for some items to be considered for this agenda that are not on this agenda, would that be considered unfinished business, or how do we capture that those items were not considered for discussion as a new item at this meeting?
In regards to items to be added to the agenda, it is up to the discretion of the chair. And in the same token, to relay any items to the chair that may have been requested, so that it can be possibly added and approved by the chair.
Does that answer your question?
Sort of, but I'm, yes.
Okay.
I'm not, I'll leave it at that.
Well, just so since we're on this topic, I was in the meeting when we were talking about setting the agenda, and remind me of how this went down, but I know that we had asked for an update on the unused space at Cole, and also a report on the asset management plan. And I think I had asked for a presentation on 1025's, what the requirements were for the deconstruction of 1025. And I know we had a discussion about it in that meeting, but I just wanted to get clear. I mean, I don't want to let it pass, actually, that we did ask for that and it's not on here. So I just want to have that addressed if we could.
So, thank you for that. So,
Recap.
Yeah, I can't
correct.
recall
So,
what they
if
were.
we're gonna recap, yeah, I can recap. So, what we agreed on in that meeting was that, in terms of the usage from Cole, it was agreed upon that that item would be discussed at Facilities Committee. That you all would bring that item to talk about the various asks, because remember we talked about what was the ultimate goal and objective of that continuing to come to this particular body, and we agreed that that discussion would be better had at the board level or at a minimum at Facilities Committee. So we agreed to agendize that for Facilities Committee as opposed to CBOC. As it pertains to the other two items, we agreed that due to the fact that the master plan was being presented this evening, that you all would have an opportunity to, because throughout the presentation, it speaks to some of the things that you all are wanting to discuss. So we agreed that you all would ask those questions as we go through the document.
Okay, so I understand what you're saying from your perspective. From my perspective and from our committee's charge perspective is the reason for asking for Cole to come to this committee is because our responsibility is to make sure that we spent the taxpayers' money in accordance with the measure. And if a facility is built for a purpose and it is not being utilized at capacity, then it is actually, in my opinion, a disservice to the overall usage in the school district. So I feel like it should come to this committee. And that it is not at a facilities and board, because the project, I would like to know if it's certified. If I go on the website, the Division of State Architects website, I only see one, what's called a Form 103 posted, and it's from the contractor, and it was dated the middle of December. I'm not saying it's not certified, but that's all I see, and I ask simply, what was it certified as for usage? It's not a K-12 school. It's an admin building, and I want to understand why we're not utilizing any of the first floor and what it would take, because I feel like it's irresponsible on our part not to know if we could be using that for an educational purpose for kids.
Well, I was just going to say, yeah, I mean, thank you for that again. And I believe, just to add, it was agreed by the group to move it forward through that body, because those questions were asked multiple times for this committee throughout. I think they presented 3 or 4 times on that particular thing. So in order to perhaps have the discussion somewhere else, was a big part of why. Because I know those questions were asked and answered, and I don't remember off the top of my head, but I just know we came multiple times. We had the team come multiple times. So, yeah. But I won't belabor that particular point in terms of all of the things that we have to get through.
And I would just add, and we can talk about it more at length in the presentation, because there are areas where the master plan supports the asset management plan, and that would be part of the asset management plan, because clearly it's an asset, and definitely happy to talk through it, because we'll kind of map out for you in the master plan where this starts to lay in terms of assets and future uses.
we could begin your presentation. I would like for you to start, to kind of skip the beginning, which talks really is more directed, I think, for the board session, and start at least on either page 5 or 7, which, kind of gets us more into the meat of
Yeah.
what we are trying to do. We've seen the goals before.
Awesome. Okay. Just to reintroduce myself, I'm Preston Thomas. I'm the Chief Systems and Services Officer, and I just want to apologize. David and I are here. The other half of the team is out sick, so Pranita and Sele wanted to be with us tonight, but they're both, one of the things, working close together with each other, there's a consequence to that. So I'm here representing, I think, like, one of the things that I would just like to state is that, if you go back, and I know that many members of this, of CBOC and this committee are aware of, like, past master plans, this is the deepest dive that we've done into facilities conditions, even prior to 2016. So we're really excited by some of the information. We are a little bit behind the schedule. We initially thought we would be here sharing with you all the first draft of the master plan. We wanted to incorporate the water quality and use the water testing data, and that contract is coming to the board on Wednesday. So that will be included in the draft. So at the next CBOC committee, you will have the full draft of the master plan. It'll be open to the public for feedback and review. And so this is a great opportunity for you all to provide additional feedback. And I do really want to, thank Chair Gonzalez and Secretary Dawson for showing up at the study session that this material is coming from, and kind of providing some context from CBOC as well. So I'll jump into it. So a couple of things, and just want to level expectations around, hold on, how's that, there we go, Corey, okay. So a couple of things. It is a long-term planning tool, and it's the basis of a lot of different things. It's a dynamic framework, and one of the things that's going to happen in this, one of the challenges that many of the major projects have had in this round is that they were based on numbers that weren't changing from when they were initially done. So the Garfield project, you've noticed that we've come back for additional funding for all of those. It will be dynamic, and the numbers will update each year as inflation and escalation is included, so that the board and CBOC has real-time understanding of, like, what the costs are for the projects and the investments that are proposed. We are coordinating with the City of Oakland around their long-range models for where housing lands, and so I know that you've asked about developer fees and different types of fees. Developer fees, there's a tight nexus between new construction and new growth and new students that would be coming into the district. That will be included in this plan. It will be used for reprioritization in this bond, but also tentatively, the 2028 cycle is when we would likely be going out for a new bond. This will become the master plan that is driving some of the priorities in that bond. So it's really, as kind of the Citizen Bond Oversight Committee, to be also thinking about what is the long-term vision and what are the things that need to be included within this for future bonds if we decide that this is something that's in the interest of the district to go out. When it's not, at this time, we're not ranking all the capital projects. Typically, when you go out for a bond, there's a capital list. It's not a budget document. The spending plan is the document that supports kind of the current bond. And it's not a plan that determines the programmatic changes. So I know that there's been community feedback around potentially right-sizing or consolidating schools and things like that. You will have the data that supports those types of initiatives that will rest here, but it's not that. And it's also not your asset management plan, but it does deeply support the asset management plan. And so this is a diagram that hopefully can kind of talk about where the master plan, it's like that source document for all of these things. The academic programmatic planning, there's been a lot of conversations with the board right now about TK hubs and where do we place students where schools don't have enough space within the schools to offer transitional kindergarten. That is academic program planning as well as kind of programming with excess capacity. Asset management planning will cascade out of that, deferred maintenance plan, energy management plan. There are lots of plans that kind of cascade out of this. We fully intend on bringing forward this year the asset management plan and the deferred maintenance plan to both this body and the facilities committee after this facilities master plan is approved. So that is something we can start talking about agendizing. Then there are strategies and operations. What are the priorities? What are the initiatives? What is the re-envisioning of the footprint? So that would be something that has been talked about through the 3Rs resolution, but how does the board see that moving forward? And then also, of course, collaboration with the city of Oakland. And then the long-term outcome is like a facilities project list. We're working from the project list that came in the 2020 master plan, but there is opportunity, particularly with the contingency, to think about how we might reprioritize that as we get new data in from the community. So process findings, I'll go through this, and Chair Gonzalez, if you want me to pick it up and go faster in certain places, I'm happy to do that. There are really 4 components of the outreach: data collection and analysis, procedural policies, and funding options. So that is kind of step 1. Step 2 is where we're at, is developing the framework. And this is where feedback at this point is still very relevant to where the final draft of the plan is. And then the plan is what will be coming forward to you at the next CBOC meeting for you to review the plan, and it'll be open to the community. There's a lot of different elements. I just want to highlight a couple of things. The facility condition assessment, the FCA, is the first one that's been done in over a decade. And there's a much deeper dive at the educational adequacy, which is inside the walls. What are the programmatic pieces in schools? Clearly, the demographics of the city of Oakland are shifting and changing, and that is a key part of this. Also, one of the things at the bottom I just want to highlight is it is now required for your master plan to include the Office of Public School Construction has dollars that are associated with our schools, and it requires you to have that affiliated with your master plan so that you can look and see how much funding can be reimbursed from the state when you decide to take up a project. So for example, McClymonds, a project that currently is underway, has a certain amount of funding that once the state gets to, it's probably not going to be in Proposition 2, but the next proposition that comes out with the state bond, you would get some funding back to reimburse you for the investment that you made in McClymonds. The same thing is true with Roosevelt, Garfield, all the different schools in that plan. Here is just the 2020 master plan, really focused on major modernizations in that green bucket, which is the vast majority of your funding. And then those are the strategic initiatives that were affiliated with the bond. So it was really like there was $200 million for generally across the district, and then there were major modernizations that were the focus of that green area. That is the way the current bond was structured, and we used that to try to identify lots of blended sources of funding that we could use to complement it. The most obvious and clear one is the CAL FIRE grant. If you look, it's over there on grants. It's a state grant program, CAL FIRE, CAL SHAPE. The 2 schools, both MLK and Manzanita, had a significant investment of over $1.5 million that came based on grant funding that we paired with a playground project at those school sites. So this master plan allows you to do lots of different elements of funding in the way that you support the facilities in the district. Let's see. Okay. Tremendous engagement across the community. And so this is just, we did hold some town halls. We held 2 that were elementary level and then 1 middle and high, but also lots of workshops to standing committees in all city councils, student leadership, student advisory, the PSAC, I think the CAC, which is actually meeting right now, the administrative assistant. Yeah.
I have a
Oh,
question.
yeah, sure.
You have a question, yes.
Yep.
How do you want to structure this in terms of when we interact? You want to, are
We
there natural
can-
breaks in here or as we
was-
go? Or?
Right. What were your thoughts on that, Preston? I thought we would take some sections here.
Yep.
And stop. Metrics.
Yep. At each
Can
of the
you
green
yeah.
pages, I thought that would be like a great spot to stop and see if there's clarifying questions. And there are some this was designed for the board study session, so there are also some prompts. If you'd like to answer those questions as well, that's great as well. So there's,
I can wait until the green
Yeah.
page.
Okay.
That's 15 or
it's
16.
it's 3 slides away.
So we're on 13 now.
So we've updated the website. I think one of the things is using survey tools to survey the community about what their interests are, and we'll look at that data in a second. And then direct email messaging, feedback from network superintendents, parent squares, a lot of outreach broadly to the community. You'll see, so when we were characterizing the feedback that we got, and this is both from the in-person engagements, which were really powerful to hear people talk about how they were experiencing the schools, and then also through the survey data, they kind of grouped in some key areas. And so you're seeing those groupings that were there. The infrastructure reliability, number one at the top of that list by far was classroom heat, climate control, and HVAC issues, knowing that most of our classrooms were designed without any forced ventilation. So that definitely came up in all of the subgroups. Electrical systems to meet the modern needs. Many schools can't even have a portable air conditioner in their rooms because the electrical infrastructure for the schools are so old and outdated. And the one that actually came up, it started first in the middle school, but then it started to grow in terms of as we met with more students, was the quality of our restrooms and also the water quality issue across the district. And the board has already dedicated $20 million worth of the current bond to support that, but they want us to, continue that work. The second one was definitely around the outdoor amenities and looking for outdoor learning spaces, play spaces, athletic spaces, the importance of sport, safety considerations, also climate control from the outside perspective, looking at ways to mitigate heat island effects at schools. And then there was a big group around next generation learning, like what's the learning environment in the school like? So you could see that it didn't necessarily map. You see parents, guardians, caregivers, teachers, district staff, and students. Those 3 areas are kind of at the top, but there were lots of different areas that people were providing feedback and guidance on. 3 themes that I think are really important for CBOC, and it goes to your question about is Marcus Foster, previously the Cole Administrative Building. They want us to invest in long-term sustainability, and sustainability in 2 ways. 1, sustainability from an environmental standpoint, and 2, sustainability from a operational district stability standpoint. That theme came up very strong. Modernize facilities to strengthen enrollment. Look at the areas in Oakland where you have enrollment and you have an enrollment need, and make sure that you have great facilities in those spaces where you have there's going to be a long-term investment. And build environments that support students but also retain staff. The quality of the teaching environment and the school environment for our staff was a critical factor. Both staff, students, and families raised up as that the facility actually does matter, right? Like it's not just about wages and other things, those are important, but also the facilities and the work environment is really critical. And we're about to go into this, is that really, and we're probably going to change the names of some of these things based on some of the feedback that we've heard around the different types, but let me see if I can describe it. The left 2 areas are areas that are district-wide investments, where you're looking at something, and a really great example where we've watched it fall down in terms of facilities required, facilities priorities, is the safety investments. In the last, it was very much at the top. We've done a lot around door entries. We've done a lot of things to secure the perimeter of schools. And we've also watched how the camera systems and those things have fallen down in a priorities list. That was a district-wide initiative. We've done every high school. We've done every middle school. And we're into installing updated camera systems in the elementary schools. But the door entry systems have been done across all the schools. So that's an example of something that is a district-wide improvement. That's those 2 boxes. They can be based on the data, like where does the district, one of the things that came up in the facilities master plan is parent communication through marquees. Some schools have fancy new marquees, some have really old, and some don't have any, right? That's a barrier to communication with families, right? That's an example of a focused improvement that's condition-based. You could also have program-based, which is an example of that is the governor has expanded to TK, but there wasn't any funding really allocated to really address the TK need across all of our schools, right? That's a program focused where you wouldn't necessarily go to every school, but you would really make sure that you have vibrant TK spaces in every school. The other ones are more transformative things, and those are where you are investing deep to fix many, many systems in that school. And the 5 examples of that are the current major projects that you have, right? You have 2 directions that you can go as a district. One is a full rebuild, where you just ultimately decide that the facility no longer serves the needs of what the district needs in that space, and you do a full rebuild. Or you do a modernization, right? A modernization is very similar to what we're doing at McClymonds, where it's a historic building, and you're investing in upgrading that infrastructure at that school site. So that is kind of a framework that we'll talk in more depth about, but that's kind of the way it's set up. Like, where are you going deep across the district and fixing many things in an individual school to be this cornerstone of the community, and where are the things that you're going across the entire district and making sure that you have upgrades in most or many of your schools. So that's where we'll pause right there on that framework.
Questions? Andy, you want to start us, and then we'll just go left to right? Okay.
First thing I'll say, I'm glad that you're considering some rewording on the transformative schools and modernization, because as I think Viola and I both said at the meeting that we went to, you know, it's new construction. Yeah, the sink in the room is going to be in a better place maybe than where they are right now in a modernized school. But why I think it's so important to not call them transformative is because we don't want to build a school that's so special that nothing else in the district even begins to touch it, because the next generations will be sitting at this table talking about it. And, you know, it'll take 50 years to get there, and that's not fair to all the students that are going to pass through in the next 50 years. And so I am glad that you're addressing that. The other thing I wanted to understand, that you said there won't be a ranking for capital projects. What did you mean by that?
So when you go out for a bond, you clearly, the board would sit looking at data at that time to come up and figure out what are the projects that are going to be listed within the capital program and the bond. And that's some of the language that you've heard folks talk about here, but also it's like one of the things that I would say is one of the really positive things about the last 3 bonds is that we are actually addressing almost every single project that has been named through this bond, and it allows for somewhat of a reset as we move forward, right? So like, we don't want to create any false expectations by creating a list at this time when there's a lot of issues in front, but we are going to provide the data with a report card to individual schools, because there are so many factors that you should look at in terms of deciding where the project goes, right? So one of them clearly is like the enrollment, right? Is there going to be in your projections enough enrollment in that neighborhood to you know, fund an entire school? And that might mean that you're going to be shifting the boundaries. There's a lot of things that you should be doing on a regular basis around these types of decisions. So then it's also, what's the condition of that building? If 2 buildings are equal in terms of the condition of that building, one has a ton of enrollment surrounding it in an area and another one that doesn't, you might decide to invest first in this one that is supporting a larger population. That's a factor there. Then it is, and we're dealing with this with Garfield, and we'll be talking about this in an upcoming meeting, but you have a school that required a lot of upgrades around the modernization, and almost the entire bond was going to be expended on structural issues within the building and portable housing for that site. So there are a multitude of factors, and then you would also potentially want to consider OPSC funding. One school has no reimbursement to it. The other one has 15 million. That might change the weighting of it in the list. And so what you will have in this is the data, but I don't think that you'll have a clear list of schools that are ranked like this is the #1 project but you'll be able to look at them and compare them around these different factors.
Okay, so I mean, I think that's the right way to approach it. But just to be clear, as far as the condition assessment, the actual condition of the physical condition of each school, are those going to be ranked? So in other words, because what I'd like to see is that it sorts. In other words, if I wanted to sort and the top, the 10 worst come up, and then the second 10 worst, and the third 10 worst, regardless of who's there and what districts it's in,
Yes.
will we be able to sort? And then these other factors come in when you make decisions about why you're going to do a capital project at
That's
this
right.
school versus that. But I think for the public, it's really important to see the actual condition and not have to go through 500 pages to figure out which ones are the worst schools.
So there's going to be another slide that's coming in, and we
Okay.
can talk specifically to that, but just as I said, the dynamic nature of it, you will be able to look on different variables that are important variables to you to do sorting and filtering, because they will be dynamic dashboards that allow you to do that. So that is one of the, and that's one of the things that even in the previous bonds, we haven't necessarily owned the data set,
Oh,
right? We will own the data set, and the data set will be here in the district, and we have staff that can, even after the master plan is done, we have a conversation, you're like, this is not showing us what we need to see. We can create other dashboards that will allow you to see that, because in the past, it was, I remember I used to go all the time to the master plan dashboard to look at maps of schools. And then as the Jacobs data and kind of as MK Think, they took down their website, it all disappeared. We will own all of it. They'll all be hosted on district servers, different websites, and we actually have staff that is very proficient at being able to bring that forward. So we're working very closely with our RAD department.
well, I think that's very good, because then you can see the condition of the heating at every
That's
single
right.
school. You can just sort it.
That's
Yeah.
right. I'm sorry, there were other questions as well.
Yeah, thanks, Preston. So just to get warmed up for this presentation, let's see. So the one thing I would like to see on the funding allocations, let's see, the funding sources slide is, where the hell is it?
That's my favorite slide. Do
It's,
you want me to bring it up?
This one here.
Yeah.
It's got, all the sources look like, if, just visually looks like these are equal amounts. And I'd like to see a graphic or a table or something that shows me how much of this comes from bonds, how much of it comes from grants, partnerships, et cetera. And I think the public would see that as well. So that's one thing. Okay.
Do you want me to, I can even tell you.
Well, you don't have to do it right now.
Okay.
Well, you, let me get
Well,
through.
yep,
And
go
then
for
you
it.
can, so, then, when you talk about, like, enrollment driving these decisions, do you mean, do you mean the numbers of school-age children in the surrounding catchment area?
Mhm.
Or do you mean the numbers of kids who are gonna come through our school choice program to a school?
I think it's 3 or 4 variables. So it's not, one, it first starts with students that live in the neighborhood.
Okay.
Wherever we're defining the neighborhood boundary, how many school-age children are there now? And how many are we projecting to have in the future? That's an important variable, right? And I will say, the way that the city of Oakland plans its housing deeply influences that. Because a lot of the housing that was planned in the last, I think, 10,000, 15,000 units have been hugely dedicated to market rate housing that isn't affordable housing sorted, like for families. That impacts the public school system, and those policies were laid down a long time ago. That's one. Second is, what is our share of students that live in that neighborhood? So for example, let's just keep it at, like, some of the students the vast majority of students go to Oakland Unified School District, but some opt for charter schools in a particular neighborhoods, and that's proximity to charter schools, depending upon their boundary and how close they are to other cities. Some put for inter-district transfers, and some also depending upon the median income in that neighborhood will also choose into private schools. So we're talking about looking at the full dynamics for that area, and then there's also the demand rate. How many families want to go to a particular school? So those are the 5 variables that all of those will be in the facilities master plan and should be considered when making decisions around the bond dollars.
Okay. Well, let me make a comment on that, and then I have a final point, a question. So, it seems, so, I mean, it's not necessarily really directed specifically to you, but just to the universe. This is where having a strategic plan, right, is important. And to my mind, you know, having a plan that prioritizes the creation of high-quality neighborhood schools, in particularly in neighborhoods where we've traditionally not done right by kids, basically in the flats. And so if we're planning this and we're looking at, oh, well, we should work in this particular school because that's where the demand is, we might also think about how do we do facilities construction and planning in ways that actually create schools in every neighborhood that are attractive to the kids in that neighborhood, right? And not just accept sort of the current dynamics that you described, right? And I'm not saying, I mean, I'm just putting this out to the universe. So I just, you know, I think as we're having these conversations and this and going even to the next bond, you know, I'm gonna looking for those kind of conversations. Like, you know, every neighborhood deserves to have a school where the children in that neighborhood feel welcome and are able to go and learn and not have to drive across town. And so I actually want to keep lifting that up. So that's my normative statement, soapbox. And then let me ask you another question. Thank you very much, Andrea, for the new construction. That's much better language. How much new construction? I was looking in here for a map of, I'm looking frantically for a map of the district and all the schools. I didn't see it, maybe it's in here somewhere. But it would be really, well, there's one right over there on the wall. But, you know, like I'm trying to get in my mind, all right, how much new construction, right? You know, I know we're gonna have to go through the whole process, but just ballpark. What are we thinking, how many sites in your mind, in facilities mind, are we talking about needing a new construction?
Yeah.
And which ones would those be?
I think so
That's premature, maybe.
no, it's definitely premature. So I'm not going to put something on the record that like locks me into something. But I will say to this point, I just want to name that your question around equity and making sure that you have a system that looks at the history of what has happened in Oakland Public Schools, including redlining and all the other things that have happened to segregate the communities and not necessarily provide quality options, is huge. I think you can use the bond program to actually address some of those things. And I do think there are some examples of projects that have actually done amazing transformations and I'm sorry I'm using the word transformation now, I'm afraid to say the word transformation, but I would say the ICS TCN Cesar Chavez complex that used to be the Montgomery Ward building is a great example of a transformation in that area for that school. And it's still fully, you know, full capacity. It's in a high density neighborhood. So I would say that is an example. I think if you're looking at like kind of the language in the current bond, right, and there's an intent when you give a small amount in the fourth draw of funding around like a school like Elmhurst, you can use that to strategically plan out what the next project would be. I do think we need to have at least and I think the structure of the bond is good, is like you're likely going to be investing in a high school in some major modernization some way across the district. And if you set up the next 3 bonds with some sort of project that is a major project for that high school over the next 3 bonds, you are transforming the landscape of the high school campuses. I think you need to at least have 1 middle school in each of the bonds, right? And given the number of middle schools there are, I think the interesting spot is elementary. because in our elementary landscape, and I was here in Oakland when Oakland was at its peak. I was a teacher. That's why I got involved in the small schools movement, because there were, Jefferson had about 1,200, 1,300 kids on that campus. It was huge. It was massive, right? And it's still one of our densest areas. Like Global Family is one of our, it's filled to the seams. I think there is a question about like some of these schools that are really, really built small, like for 250 kids, because they were built 100 years ago when the funding structure was different. And they're in particular neighborhoods where you could walk to the school. And so I do think that there is a conversation where we want to have that equity framework. And I do think we need to have some really our most strategic conversations are probably about what does the elementary landscape look like from a facilities program. So I don't know what that's why the data is so important. That's why the community feedback is so important. That's why getting the data out there around enrollment is going to be an important driver for what the elementary school investments are. So I could say you could do 2 to 3 elementary projects as well. I think the bandwidth of 5 major projects per bond is probably a pretty good number. And that still gives you space to do more of the broad district-wide investments that also help every kid. So is that pretty,
Yeah,
does that give you close enough to what you want?
that's helpful.
Okay.
I have some other things, but I'm gonna wait. I see that Garfield is the.
Do you mind if I just, this is along the lines of what Andy brought up. I want to, so what I want to try to do is dive a little deeper in the notion or the messaging and mindset of making sure that hill versus flat, well, let's stick with flats, the investments are there type of conversation, because when I hear that as someone who's been in the department for a lot of years and knows that that has been the narrative 18 years now.
Well, more than that.
Well, I'm just saying that's how long I've been, right? And so for me to know that although we go in and do these investments at said places, I want to get from you, how do you think that that could potentially show up in a document that's now going to be, I think you said earlier that this will be a kind of a living document to show that at a moment in time it occurred based on folks' input, based on the various things that are going on to allow us to do these things, so that years from now another body or another group isn't having the same challenges of trying to remember or identify, because things are kind of cyclical. Like when it's done and it's the brand new shiny toy, it's great. The investments are there. Maybe programmatically everything is there. And then things shift. It may be a leader may leave or initiatives change, right? And so then that same place that was once the beacon is no longer the case, right? Type of deal. And so for me, when I hear these types of conversations, I'm really interested in hearing from you how to kind of make sure that those things live not only at the moment that it's done, but it at least has a reference that it did occur type of deal. And I'm not saying that what you're saying is inaccurate. I'm just saying help us to maybe capture that as we're doing this now, because I think that is a big challenge for how to have a document like this serve the purposes and also address the questions and the needs that folks are bringing our way.
Well, and I know other folks want to, just since you and I are kind of in dialogue, right, I'll just say this. I'm not quite sure. I don't know if this is exactly what you're saying, but I think that's a conversation. That is the conversation. Well, embedded in that is my notion of what is the conversation that Oakland Unified School District needs to be having right now, which is like, how do you like create structures that don't allow future generations of board members and superintendents and executive leadership to just throw stuff up and start over again like pickup sticks, quite frankly. So I feel like I will say this, one good place to start with that's a conversation that's beyond facilities. Like facilities really ought to be sort of like this is the district ought to say, this is our overall strategy, and it's an overall equity strategy, and this is what it is, and then facilities ought to be one component of that, right? So, and so I think one way to actually make sure that stuff continues to happen is to ensconce it in law through the bond, right? Make a promise to voters that you can refer to over generations of leadership or several iterations of school leadership. That's one idea. And, you know, Dave, there's a lot more to be said about this, and I'll just be quiet.
All right, if I could have, do you have questions, Andrew? Or Nana? Okay, yeah.
Because what you said about having, this is a living document, but we're basing it on, if we're basing it on enrollment, and people are enrolled in the school based on what's going on in the community, right? But what's going on in the community is not always going to be that way, right? And we want to impact what's going on in the community, right? And sometimes schools are what impacts what goes on in the community. So we don't want to put the cart before the horse. We want to be balanced about how we're thinking about putting weight on the community as well as the school. The school should be appealing in many different ways, not just the education, right? And whatever is going on in the community, you know, good or bad, the school is supposed to amplify the best. I'll put it that way. Amplify the best so that the parents will want their children to stay there, right? So we want to be really balanced about this and, you know, be the voice for them. If we are helping to make the decisions, then we have to be the voice and not just say, well, enrollment is down, so we won't put any money into this right now. Well, no, we need to put the money into it so that it would be an increase in the enrollment.
Do you mind if I comment in two ways on that? Because I think it's a really important point. And I'm going to juxtapose two projects. We're sitting in the La Escuelita complex. Like, if folks remember this was like the center, and it was a huge stabilizing force in this community. The La Escuelita building was built. This whole building has built, and this was a great, amazing neighborhood to come into. I used to love coming down here. And then the pandemic happened. And the level of crime and violence in this neighborhood has skyrocketed. This school is still the stabilizing force. Like, this school, Met West, Dewey are the stabilizing forces and have moved strongly to deal with 1025 and the encampments and some of the other things around it, right? So this is a way that sometimes, like, even the best laid data at that time, 20 years ago, when we planned out and committed to this building, were huge. And juxtapose that to McClimate's right now. Like, McClimate's is going to be, and you know, it's in DSA right now, it's about to come out and we'll go into construction. It's about $100 million in that area. It is going to revitalize that entire school, right? And right now, there's about 300 students that are attending that school, but we're building a school for 625. I know by looking at the enrollment data that there's over 850 high school age students that live in that neighborhood right now. They're not because of some of the neighborhood related issues or other variables that families use to, but we're gonna do something to change at least the narrative that we can make about the school, the facility, and the resources that are provided there. So this is what I mean when, you know, David talks about like all of these neighborhoods are incredibly dynamic, and there are changes, and we have to continue to adapt the program to serve the students and families that are interested in going to those schools, particularly when we're making significant investments in a facility like this or a facility like McClimate's, Roosevelt, Garfield, like across the city. And so that's why I think we're really excited about kind of this, like this master plan really giving and ongoing tools for the community to engage in that conversation long after we're in these seats. And, you know, I really do hope that people look back and say that we made some really smart decisions in this phase of the bond program. So I'm sorry, that resonated with me a lot.
Thanks. Yeah, so I had a couple questions related to the community engagement and the surveys. The first one is, so I did notice that district staff also participated in the surveys. Do you know if there is any sort of kind of overlap, or did we notice any like mismatch between what the district staff said would be the priorities versus what the the teachers, the students, the community members?
So this is like, actually, I'll use this as an example. What we're probably going to do. And it's a statistically significant number. To understand what the community's interests are, it's about 500. If you look at the outdoor amenities, is a really interesting one. You could see that both parent, guardians, and caregivers really rate that as a really important thing for them. Staff, actually, that orange bar, which is teachers, principals, and school site staff, and we can kind of disaggregate that out a little bit, actually rated it probably somewhere around the 4th or 5th thing. So you can, as you're looking at this, you could see kind of how there are different students. Interestingly, students, the community connection is the highest thing for students. They were the highest group to rate that. Why? Because they see that school as a place where a lot of other things happen for them. After school sports, basketball, those types of things, but also it is in their community. So it's interesting to see how, and then particularly you can see high school students in the final one around linked learning, they rated, and that's mostly high school students, they rated the physical space in their school as being really important in their CTE pathways. And it's interesting to me, and I know, Vice Chair Nelson and I go way back around like kind of Measure N and now Measure H and linked learning. It's interesting to me that the bond program has never actually invested in the CTE spaces, right? And that's that alignment between strategic plan and the bond program, and the people that are lifting it up are the students. And you do see it when you go to a place like Fremont, where we were really intentional about like kind of creating some of those CTE spaces. It's not that we didn't do it, but like you could also do it in schools that don't necessarily have a major project happening at them where you're modifying the CTE spaces. So does that get to your member Butler? In terms of how that data is disaggregated?
It does. That was helpful. And then the other question is, so if we glean certain insights from this data and from the responses around what different stakeholders in the community believe is sort of should be a bigger priority, does that sort of change the approach or change the plan, or is it, oh hey, we still have these limited resources, and then we've got we've got to make sure that the HVAC is working well, and that how then is the feedback incorporated?
There is. So we did take the feedback. We haven't put percentages on it. This tier 1 is high investment. HVAC modernization. Sorry. All right. HVAC modernization and air quality improvements is way up there on the list. We should be spending a significant amount. Water quality, plumbing, electrical infrastructure are critical. Restroom modernization is an interesting one, right? Not only because it's around dignity and having a dignified space to use a restroom, but it also came up as a safety issue for students because it's the least supervised space in the school, right? So one of the areas that we are seeing, and actually CCPA is the first facilities project that we've had private restrooms where each individual stall is there. So you have an individual stall that you can go into, and the sink area is generally in the open area. That we're piloting that with CCPA first. But those are some of the things that the community is asking for because of some of the safety issues with the restroom and just like kind of the dignity side of it. We would expect when you're looking at that, and we'll talk about the T, but when you're talking about every school getting addressed, that at least 50% of the dollars would go in that tier 1 category, right? And then tier 2 is more medium investments, where maybe 30% of your whatever you decide is the dollar amount in that category is going to those things. But also one of the things that we heard, and you've heard it at these committee meetings as well, and you've heard it at the facilities committee meetings, like we're behind on renovating some of our athletic facilities. And people are really excited by the turf replacements and things like that we've been doing. They don't want us to turn a blind eye to the play structures and the things like that. They want us to maintain those things moving forward, right? And so those are some of the things that we've heard loud and clear, like you don't have to invest a lot because we've gone really deep right now, but keep on a schedule so that I mean, David and I absolutely are aware of when Skylines Field needs to be replaced. We're aware of when Castlemont's Field needs to be replaced. And that should be on a regular schedule where you can predict that's going to be done. So this is kind of for the district-wide kind of overall investments. This is the way that we saw the data tiering those feedback into those areas.
Thanks. And one last question. And I'm not sure if you'd be able to discern this from the data, and I'm not sure how anonymous it was, but did you find in the responses a big variation between what certain communities or certain neighborhoods prioritized as, oh, these are the sort of most important things, and then in vastly different neighborhoods, was it similar or was it also somewhat different?
It was similar in pattern, but not in volume. So what I mean by that is, I'll just pick HVAC and ventilation. We heard a lot from hill schools and slope schools about the air quality and the heat in their classrooms. But having spent my entire life in the Fruitvale and that area, I also know that some of our hottest classrooms are at Lockwood. And we did not, if you looked at the survey data, it was lifted up in some of those community engagements. But definitely it was not the magnitude of what we were seeing, but the pattern still existed. And we know that it's definitely something teachers and students, for teachers, it generally was, for teachers and staff at school sites, it generally, that pattern existed throughout, right? Mm-hmm. Because they're true to their school, they're filling it out and all the things. When we looked at what parent, guardians, and caregivers, the volume of responses were different by site, but the general patterns about what was important were the same. I don't know if that, because filling out a survey is not necessarily the easiest modality for folks. That's why a lot of our community engagements were publicly in spaces that it might be easier for families to get there, when they're picking up their kid.
So Preston, maybe you can take us now to the second section?
Can I just make one comment, and you don't even have to answer it, but just, it's really a thought. So a way to capture the history maybe, it would be an appendix, on each school's condition assessment and report, which I assume is going to be this 500-page document. It moved you to an appendix, and I'm going to use Evergreen School as an example. That I think that it's still the name of it. Is it Evergreen? Or Greenleaf? Greenleaf.
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 Greenleaf. Oh, I thought you were talking about Evergreen Community College District down in.
So Greenleaf is an interesting study because what was the enrollment there, and what was and then it got modernized. It also got an extraordinary principal. But so the enrollment was here and it went up, and now what's the enrollment today? But at least there could be a little history on all of these schools that have been done in the last bond. It would be hard to go back to, all 4 bonds ago, Measure C. But if you had some history, you captured it so people would have a memory, and it would jog someone's memory on the board or on this committee to say, well, that's why, you know, you're going to pick this school over this school to do. Anyway, I think it needs an opinion.
No, that's great. And I think just in terms of, and this is actually where this slide, I'm moving into the metric section. One of the things that's interesting, like what's new, interactive dashboards, education adequacy assessments, next generation teaching, learning, district-wide, all that is in there. But the bottom part is the part that's really new. It's dynamic living tool. It's not going to be as long. It's not going to be a 500-page document. It's probably going to be much less in terms of the volume, but it is going to have interactive dashboards that were historically multiple pages that would fill up so you won't have a 500-page document, right? It'll have an executive summary with interactive dashboards, and also that is where actually one of the things that has been the hardest because of transition from like paper to digital databases and things like that is to be able to tell the stories of all of our school sites. And that is definitely something that even if it's not done at the time that the current condition is done, we can use that as a project to build over time to be able to tell that story with each of the sites. The historian over there. Exactly. So so you will get a facilities condition assessment, and that is the exterior enclosures, which is walls, doors, windows, all the things that you'll get a rating on it. The electrical systems, the fire protection, fire life safety, heat, ventilation, and air conditioning. And what we're trying to do is actually separate those apart. In the industry, they often talk about them as HVAC, because in most of the country, HVAC is both heat, ventilation, and air conditioning. That is not so much true in Mediterranean climate up against the bay in other places. They will have heat, but not ventilation and air conditioning. So we're trying to give an assessment for each one, and that's actually been one of the hardest things for the AECOM to do, is to divide out that information because it's not traditionally done. But we have like gas furnaces inside classrooms. We have boiler systems that do the heat. We don't have ventilation other than windows. Right, so we want to be able to disaggregate that so that we can use that, because it's not just HVAC, it's different components of HVAC. The plumbing system, both water and sewer, and they are gonna, and this is what's coming to the board, is just the addition of using, because this is an interesting thing. I'm gonna tell you, I'm sorry, I'm gonna nerd out on this for a while. They do a visual assessment when they come through and they're doing a lot of the assessments of the schools. Well, in the lead issues, we've replaced a lot of the exterior fixtures. And so what they see on the outside is everything's new. So they're checking it off, and it got really highly rated initially because we've done all the replacements. But it's the pipe and the infrastructure that was not in there. And we said, hey, we really want you to include this robust testing data that we used to include in the plumbing assessment. So that's what's coming to the board. As it's not additional money, it's just in the contingency to actually include that within the report. So that will include kind of a review of the testing data that we did over the summer. Roofing systems, structural infrastructure, and that's where a lot of the seismic information would come, and then site improvements, systems entering the site. There's some smaller that are dollar amount, but like really important, but probably a much lower weighting would be accessibility, elevators and chair lifts, and exterior closures and stairs. I mean, it's like such a small subset that it's not really a core system. This is where we're really going to go robust around the educational adequacy, and those are the different areas around the instructional conditions inside the room. There's more and more research that's coming out about just the importance of different conditions within the classroom to student learning. The quality of the air, the CO2 percentage, the amount of light that you're exposed to, natural light. So that will all be in the educational adequacy that you'll be able to see. As we look at capacity, you're going to see 3 capacities, right? One is the OPSC capacity, how many kids fit in classrooms, but we're also looking at like a programmatic capacity, because not all classrooms are the same. They don't have the same number of kids. They don't have the same, like a SDC classroom has a class size that's significantly smaller. And so we'll be doing both the building capacity, the program capacity, and the, what's the third one? there's three types of capacity that you'll see, because a lot of times you've heard people say, well, wait a second, there's not enough room in our site for all the things that we're putting in there. That's really where you're using the regular traditional capacity, where you just count up classrooms and multiply by kids in the contract. We're gonna have a much more nuanced conversation about capacity based on the program that's there. And then, also that includes portables. And right around 2000, 1995, 96, when I came into the district, if you had been in the facilities department, this is a little bit before David was there, they were dropping portables everywhere. And there's artifacts of that everywhere, and that aging infrastructure is there. We will break things down into overall like capacity of the main building, but also the portable capacity and the ages of the portables on those sites. So they're all there. I just need to read my own slide. So this is kind of the dashboards, and this is a very early draft that we wanted to show you. We're going to use a grading system that is grading things like where if it's an F, it's like there is needed replacement there. And so you could see, and this is just a sample, I think we did it for Garfield. This is for Garfield. So structurally, Garfield is an F because there's significant structural issues that are there. The exterior enclosure, not that bad. At this time, it was a B. There's some other things that we were looking at. The roofing is a D. It needs to be replaced. The HVAC is an F. The electrical is a D. This is one of those sites that you would be looking at that data to say, hey, wait a second, what are we doing at the school site? This would push it much more towards a major modernization that is much bigger because of this. You'll see that there's a lot of different information that you all care about, like square footage, the age of the building in general, total buildings, total, what does that say? I can't even read that, it's too small. Programmatic capacity is 957, so currently it's built for 957, but that is that basic programmatic capacity where you just multiply by classrooms by the contract maximums. That is probably not the best way to evaluate the overall capacity. So a lot of this, and you could see that in Garfield, which is an interesting thing, Garfield only has $594,000 worth of OPSC eligibility in that site. Which is, and what that meant is the district has probably done a lot of very small projects and got reimbursement for it over time, but you can see the impact on the overall condition of the facility. So there's not a lot of reimbursement with that site currently. So the district will hold the whole cost for that in the bond program. There'll be public dashboards around, you can look at different variables by site with the map, and the actual names of the schools aren't there, but if you hover over it on the dashboard, it'll tell you the names of the schools, and all the data will pop up. So that's kind of the overall types of tools that'll be dynamic dashboards that'll be there. With that. And let me just go back here one thing. As OPSC evaluates the eligibility, and that number that's 594,000, that will change every year because they update that, and that number, the dashboard will change and update that. So if we go through and we replace the roof in the deferred maintenance program, then that would bring that up to an A. And so this will track all the repairs of deferred maintenance and things like that that are done at a school site. So there we go. We'll pause there.
You'll let us know when we get to the point when we can talk about the asset management plan 1025 and things we want to have on the agenda.
Absolutely. So we've talked about this, but I just want to share one of the things, this is where some of the language that we're toying around with, different language on it, that the top of the framework, and in the current bond, when it was originally allocated, was $200 million. We'll probably orient this framework to what the last bond was in terms of the width and the size of the T, so that you could see where the dollar amounts were in terms of how this bond was allocated. The width of it is going to be very wide because there's a significant investment, that $450 million in major modernizations, whether it's a new rebuild or a modernization, that is the way this current bond is structured. So we're going to be using that framework in this current, the updated master plan, because we feel like it really describes kind of the nature of the schools in Oakland, but like I think there are some tuning to the language. Projects in the major categories for the district-wide investments are there on the right. Those are Measure Y. Other examples are down at the bottom. And I already talked about this. This is kind of these tiers that when we're talking about the top of the T and kind of district-wide investments, we would think about that in terms of 3 tiers. One tier is like these are where we should invest a significant percentage of the investment that should be somewhat driven by data. We do know that the community has very much said that HVAC modernization and air quality is important. Then medium investments, and then the sustained investments, and we've already talked about that. And there was our discussion break for the board before we go into the major projects. So we've already talked about that. I don't know if you want to pause and ask questions about that. This was the frame for the study session to invite the board directors to have comments about this. Let's go into, so then this is the deep investments in major projects. So this is going the down part of the T. And this is where we're going to change a lot of this language in here around just, we're talking about new construction on the left, and we're talking about modernization on the right. But also, like, one of the things, I do want to point this out, and this is like a point of, if you go around to OUSD schools, there was a period of time where there were investments in not the whole campus, but part of the campus. So you have one building that was modernized or new, and one building that didn't get touched. So you see that in, and particularly the water quality data shows that across the district. So one of the things about major modernizations is, and this is a question around the top of the T versus the depth. Leaving part of the campus old has not actually been a very effective strategy of addressing the deferred maintenance needs at that site. Because the new site is all new, and you don't have to worry about it for deferred maintenance for a good 15 years. There's some things that you have to do around maintenance, but the deferred maintenance, the system replacements, doesn't happen. But the old building on that campus is also consistently having problems and needing to be repaired that doesn't actually solve a lot of issues. And so in terms of a full rebuild is, you know, brand new building that you build on the property or somewhere else adjacent to the property while the students are there, and then they move into the new building and you demo the older building. A modernization, I can give you an example of a school site that absolutely would be a modernization, right? Which would be Oakland Tech, because it's a historical building, right? And you're gonna modernize the historical building, but the portables can be replaced with a new construction on that side. So like, you do wanna be thinking of both of these tools as ways to go deep in investments in school communities. And so there's different advantages and disadvantages to both, and I think you articulated it very well at the study session. And here are some examples of schools that have been more rebuilds. Fremont, not fully, right? We're still continuing a project there where it's more of a modernization, and it's not going fully deep into the upper campus, but we are replacing some portables there. And then modernizations are what's happening at McClymonds and Roosevelt right now. CCPA will be one of those areas where we're replacing all the portables and replacing the gym, but the old Havens Court building is still there untouched. So these are some of the trade-offs when you have limited dollars. How do you invest them? This is just some of the metrics that you can use around it. And there's the next major point. So, yeah, go ahead.
Andrea?
Thank you. My hope is, and ask is that this is structured, the write-up, so there's flexibility in how you do determine, like, new building or major modernization, using tech as an example, because what I would say is that you can do major modernization on the main building and leave the portables for the next bond as long as you take care of the thermal comfort. It's got to have, the thermal comfort includes the roof and heating, ventilation. And you do some of both, but it's not an overall one-stop shopping, so you don't have the condition that you talked about where you have all this deferred maintenance, because that's always what the calls are about. It's about HVAC. That's the majority, right? And so I think, because once again, you don't build very many schools these days. And what's an elementary school is going to cost $75 million. Middle school is going to cost $100, and a high school is going to cost $175 to $200 million. You can't do many major overall, quote, transformative. That's why I don't like we have brand new, and serve a lot of kids. And so I'm about serving a lot of kids. So, yeah. So I hope we have flexible enough language in there that because the other thing I'll say is I get, eventually you'll have to get where you want to go as far as what the bond language looks like. And I vaguely remember what all the different bond languages look like and how different districts do it. And some districts name every single school.
Yeah.
And then they say then they pick 20 that they know have thermal comfort problems.
Yep.
And they say we will be addressing thermal comfort in these 20 schools, and they list them. And so there are different ways, and I just hope it's flexible enough in the master plan that we don't get boxed in. We have to do a revision on it.
Did anybody else have questions or comments on this? We can keep going. Okay, keep going.
Okay, so that is the framework.
Did
Like
you have a
the-
question?
Oh,
Yeah,
Oh, go ahead.
I'd like at some point, I am, as we're talking about modernization versus rebuild, and so I think part of it is, what was the impact of all those various interventions on attendance and student outcomes? And I'd be curious to know what we could learn from Fremont in that regard. I'd also be curious to know what we learned about Oakland High. And not so much from so there's a different intervention at Oakland High. The intervention at Oakland High was a freaking dynamite college and career pathways program. And so there's different kinds of interventions, right? And so I'm just throwing it out as like a learning tool for all of us as stakeholders in the district. What can you do at a school that makes it attractive for these are high schools, what makes it attractive for students, right? And families. And so, I'm also about serving as many students as possible. I'm also about doing something about our abysmal academic outcomes and social outcomes. And how does this plan fit into that? So I really would like to see at some point some analysis and some consideration of like those two interventions at those two high schools and what differences they made.
And I really appreciate you bringing that up, because I'm intimately familiar with both of them from both a facility standpoint and also as a teacher leader in that community, and also the network superintendent that worked very closely with Principal Abdulkawi around the transformation. And there's two dramatically different stories in some sense. Fremont's in a community that currently has, if you look at the attendance boundary, there's like 3,400 high school age students in that area. It's huge, right? And I think one of the things about Fremont, they actually had a school leader that was working on the ground to build the pathways and revitalize the pathways even prior to the facilities project.
That's right.
So there was a lot of groundwork that was being done around program. And then the facility came and the school just blossomed, and we went from a enrollment like about 700 students in the school to it now is 1,200 and has a wait list. So it's become, Oakland High is kind of an interesting like opposite side, is that there was deep facility investments that were there, but the program was lingering a little bit behind that, and they constantly did not have a wait list and enrollment. And by the moves of the principal working closely with the teacher leaders in the sites and the pathways, really developed some robust pathways. And then now it is, and I think it often fills just about at the exact same time as Oakland Tech does. And so that's been a transformation over time, but it is definitely both. And I'd love to, kind of work with you a little bit around those case studies, because that's just my anecdotal experience from being at both sites. But it is both of them matter significantly for the schools. So anyway, let's move on to the next part, is the part that we didn't get to talk about in the study session. And I do want to name that there's a lot of flexibility in this plan for future boards and future CBOC committees and future facilities committee meetings to really look at the data in different ways. These are some of the preliminary deficiency findings across the board. I'm just going to talk about some high-level patterns. In the last bond, they talked about $3.4 billion. This is just looking at the deficiencies, not replacement value. This is just looking at systems that are going out of date. And right now you have $3 billion worth of infrastructure that's going out, right? And the district, in its deferred maintenance program, which is Fund 14, has repeatedly used that when there are budget crises to solve its issues. So currently proposed is to only have $1 million in the deferred maintenance fund. You could see that what this data has done is it shows you what the outlook is for deferred maintenance as you move forward, because the HVAC system that you replaced 10 years ago, it has a time that it's going to need to be replaced, and that is running across every single system. One of the reasons why I bring up Elmhurst is I think it has some vintage electrical infrastructure that is circa 1960s. Still working within that school. And so, there are the roof replacement that we did, I believe it was at Chabot, that was the original roof to the original building. That's how long this deferred maintenance kind of builds up over time. So this is kind of just an important variable, because if it were not for the bond program, a lot of these deferred maintenance issues would not get addressed at many of the school sites. And so that is that T. It gives us some flexibility to address some of these issues. This is kind of the ongoing enrollment trajectory, and you could see that Oakland peaked in 2018-19. We're going to add 2 more years to this. It's some snapshots of some days. But one of the things that's really interesting is you notice that the top is the top number is the total enrollment in the school, in the city of Oakland, right? So that peaked at about 53,000 in 18-19. It has been declining across the city, but if you notice the share, the darker kind of green aqua color, whatever that is, you can notice that the percentage of share of the district enrollment that's going to the public school systems is increasing for the district recently. The charter schools are on the bottom. So it just shows that kind of some of the investments and coming out of the pandemic, the district has actually been faring much better in terms of the overall enrollment and what we capture from the overall community relative to charter schools. And I think a large part of that is kind of some of the investments we're able to make in our facilities. Here is kind of the piece that is where Oakland sits outside of the norm. And this is just OUSD school enrollment based on school size. The way that you see that is school districts with enrollment of 25,000 to 35,000, which is the range that Oakland's in. And you could see that Oakland in many ways is an outlier. And that is not just, we have some schools that were just designed really small. And those are mostly schools that were designed pre-1960, 70, somewhere in there. They're very small. But this gives you proportionality where the district sits relative to other school districts. You can also see that, many larger districts of the size of 25 to 35,000 students have much larger investments in large high schools, right? So you can see that it's like a bluer color that's, way out to the right. Those big numbers are enrollment numbers. That's a lot of the ways that some other school districts have managed the financial burdens that come around efficiencies. They invest a lot in larger high schools, and it allows them to sustain some smaller schools on the other end. So 55% of the students enroll in have enrollment under 400 students. The district average is only 17%. The state average sits at 26. So these are just variables that the district has to continue to manage, and the board has to manage around its overall footprint. This is a slide that I find really interesting. The dark green is the actual permanent program use and capacity. So those are the permanent buildings. The light green is capacity that is determined based by portables. Now, there's a whole bunch of other data in here. The orange dot is the actual enrollment by board district. So you can see in District 1 that orange dot is nearly utilizing all the capacity in that district, right? Whereas in District 2, you could see that the total enrollment could sit within the traditional capacity or the permanent program capacity at that school site. District 6 is really interesting, right? District 6, the enrollment number sits kind of right at the total capacity for the permanent program use capacity, but there's still a lot of portables on those sites, and you'll see that a lot of those portables are well beyond their age of life. So these are some of the things that you can see, as you can see in District 3, that is a district that has a lot of capacity, but also limited enrollment. And that there's a bet that we're placing on significant investments in the way that we're reutilizing the McClymonds campus will shrink the overall capacity and move to 650, right? So the green will get smaller, and the enrollment might get closer to the total capacity that's available at that school site. But you could see this is an interesting way to look at the board districts and how the history of portable placement and the traditional infrastructure in that district is set up. One thing to note is District 7 has a huge influx of charters in that district. And so you could see that the district capacity is significantly below its full capacity, but there's also a significant number of charters in some of those neighborhoods where you have tremendous capacity but low enrollment. And I think, so this was like kind of some of the prompts that are the hard questions that the district and the community need to have, which are really like, what are the basic, what must the master plan include pertaining to deferred maintenance, enrollment trends, size of schools, the use of portables, meaningful guide to future discussions and decisions about the district's footprint, right? This is where there haven't been very many conversations about how the bond program can be utilized to fix some of the things. What's the data that should be in the master plan to inform those ongoing asset management conversations? And this is your entry into asset management, right? And are there additional data points that you would like to include in the overall master plan that haven't been discussed that could support those ongoing conversations? So there's your...
Okay.
Well, what I want to know about the asset management plan is really what's being, as I understand I want to know about the current phase of it and the feasibility analysis. So, and I think there needs to be a presentation here so we can actually discuss it. I really don't think it's sufficient to just tack on a couple questions in the facilities master plan conversation. So I'll say that, and we're gonna come back to wanting to have that on our agenda. And I'll also say that, yeah, so I'm actually gonna, that's what I'll say about that, if anybody else wants to raise up. I wanna understand how those feasibility analyses are being informed. Okay, and we'd have to have a whole presentation on it for everybody on the board's edification of what they are. So it's really not, not sufficient to have that conversation here, so I'll say that.
Can I just, I think a key question that will inform the asset management plan is some of the data that's included here about the facilities. In the way that we've presented the facilities master plan and the facilities condition, because these are all factors around asset management, do you feel like all of that data is, because it will inform, the feasibility study will inform the asset management plan, and so I'm just curious, like, are there gaps in the data set that we're presenting to you that you feel like needs to be included?
I mean, you know, I'm not gonna answer, I have questions about pieces of the data here that I wanna get clarified for. So that's where my questions are. So, first is on the charter, the enrollment chart, bar chart.
What page is that?
37. This is just, are those the charter enrollment, are those, are those charters, sorry, because there's, excuse me. There are many charters that are situated in district properties, and then there's some that aren't. Right? So is this enrollment figures, this is for all charter enrollment, not for district owned charter facilities?
But yeah, and not charters that are housed in district facilities. That is not broken out here, but it can be.
Okay, yeah, that'd be interesting. Let's see, so since we're talking about enrollment, this kind of comes up. So I was looking at Garfield, and I noticed that we have a lot, most of the, it's a good-looking plan, by the way. Folks over there giving me good feedback on it, but the, like there's a lot of the expanded classroom capacity is pre-K, TK, and you know, which I understand. But then we're not expanding capacity at the higher grades very much. And so is the assumption then that pre-K, TK folks are not going to be going to Garfield, or where are they going to go?
That's one of the programmatic capacity pieces that we've been really intentional about, and this is where, kind of being from the academic side of the house, have brought some of that into the way that we're thinking about facilities, and it should be. Every student that is flowing from pre-K to TK into kindergarten, first, second, all the way through to fifth, we are designing the Garfield project to make sure that students can stay for the full trajectory of the 7 years that they would be in the school.
Because it didn't look like it from the way the classroom capacity configurations were laid out. So, but
yeah. I can tell you why that, because sometimes the classroom configurations are around classroom sizes and the enrollment size. So like when you're looking at first and second grade and third grade, you're looking at 24-to-1. And then as they go up into the upper grades, you don't necessarily need the same configuration because the class sizes actually increase at that size. So we are factoring that into, and that might be the disconnect there.
Well, I don't want to belabor this.
No.
Even with that, I had some other questions. But let's save that for another. So then on this portables account, or the portables thing, this one, 39. Just curious, so tell me about District 6, right? So District 6 has the most enrollment in the district. Well, yeah, no, it does. That's what it says here. There's like 11,000 kids in District 6. And yeah. $83.63. Yeah, so it's the highest enrollment in the district. So, what do you know about? So tell me why that is. So, like, we are always people sometimes talk about, well, we should invest in District 1 and District 4 because that's where all the kids are. But in fact, they're not there. And now District 6 goes from hills to flats, right? So maybe but what do you know about where those kids are going to school in District 6 and why there's so many of them?
Got to go on mic. Forgot. Sorry. I think one of the things that when you look at the enrollment in Oakland, and you start at about somewhere around 23rd, and you go down International, the vast majority of kids live in that corridor. So just when you go down, the density of students based on the type of housing that is there, based on like kind of the size of neighborhoods, you have a significant number of families that live in that area. So I think it's somewhere around 20,000 kids live between that area and the boundary in San Leandro on the other side. So the vast majority of students live in that area, and then up in the kind of, if you look at the region around District, Oakland gets a lot wider in terms of enrollment as you move from District 5 to District 6 and then into District 7. There's just a lot of kids below the 580, that line. And so that's in District 6, the way it's configured. And plus, you do have Skyline that kind of goes up to the top that has a significant amount of enrollment in District 6 as well. And so, but that is in District 5, 6, and 7 is where the vast majority of students in the city of Oakland live.
Thank you.
Committee members, you have questions about his presentation at this point? Comments, observations? Is there, do the committee members believe there's a value to have a study session or assign a couple of members of this committee to look at the data more in depth for the committee? I mean, is there any thought about that?
Chair Gonzalez, can I also, I just, to your point,
Yeah.
I just want to name that there's a bunch of slides in the appendix
Okay.
that show data in different ways. So just to your point around, if you wanted to have a subset to kind of review some of the data and have a study session, I just wanted to let you know there's a lot more in there that we haven't even gotten to. So I didn't know if people had seen the appendix, but there's just a bunch of different slides in there.
Well, so, I mean, to your question, Chair, I think, and I don't know quite how we would do it procedurally, but I really would value this committee having I don't know if it's we could do a subcommittee or an ad hoc committee or something that, so we can, because this is gonna be finalized, you're coming back with a final in a month, right?
The timeline will be, it's going to be open to the community sometime at the end of January, where the public will get the first draft.
Yeah.
You all will have the first conversation with it at the first CBOC meeting in February, and then it will come to the Facilities Committee at the end of that month for their first opportunity to have a conversation about it, and then they will recommend it to the full board with any potential modifications or things that they would like added. The board will have its first read, and then a final draft will come back the following month.
Yeah. So I think between now and our next CBOC meeting, I really would like to find a way for at least those of us who can do it within Brown Act to have some in-depth conversation, especially because, for a number of reasons, but this is coming up to informing the next bond. We should really dig into this.
I'd like some help here procedurally. If there's an interest on the group to have an ad hoc committee, that they could review it more in depth. We also be adding a new committee member next month as well, but that will be when we will be hearing the final. So I don't know how we want to proceed on that. But yes, go ahead.
I have some thoughts on it.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we could have an ad hoc committee of 3. So, and then others could choose to study the documents and give their questions to the ad hoc committee, and we make a date certain where we're going to have a study session, we will be looking at the documents ourselves, and then ask those questions, and then report back at our February CBOC committee. So, I mean, that's the way I see it working. So, I mean, it's totally legal to have an ad hoc committee.
I assume, Andrea, you would like to be part of that ad hoc committee?
Well, I don't have to be. I can give my questions to someone else if, it depends how much others want to be involved. So,
Where are you at this point, Anana or Andrew? Or do you have time to review anything? I mean, that's the other consideration as
dive.
well. And,
I already know that I don't.
Yeah, I don't want to volunteer myself for,
Okay.
for any sort of additional commitments at this point.
okay, that sounds fine. And Andy?
I could do a meeting,
Okay,
yeah,
at least one session, okay.
and I would
and
like to
I
really,
can too. Yeah.
and really want to, proactively reach out to both Andrew and Clark,
Thing. If,
get their input.
Okay.
the appendix.
Okay, so we could name at least the two of you. I guess I could join you as possible, and that would make us three. So that would be, okay. And then turns out we're the three officers, so I guess that works out.
And just, Mr. Hollis, is there anything we need to do as staff if,
Will we have, before the committee sees it, will there be kind of an earlier draft of some kind that we can look at?
yeah,
At
so
least a couple of weeks before?
we're planning on putting the whole draft public in late January. So that would give you 2 weeks. And if you wanted to schedule the study session during that time, I'm just not sure procedurally if an ad hoc needs to be noticed or not.
I wouldn't think so.
Yeah. And staff is happy to sit down. Look, honestly, this is like a huge undertaking. I think going deep in it is really important. There's only a few people in the whole entire city of Oakland that are going to go through it to the depth, and that's why you all are here. So we're
Okay.
happy to dedicate some time to go through the data.
That would be great.
Yeah.
Then why don't we figure out a time among ourselves that would make sense, given when it'll be released? And I think that would be a good outcome, because it is going to be, even if for public consumption, it's going to be like more streamlined, it will require some thinking through on it. I noticed that you mentioned on the portables about how the life of some of these portables is exhausted. We've gone beyond the expiration date. And that at the same time, it's the portables in the table that you composed on page 39 sort of talk about additional capacity that we don't seem to be needing at this point. Was that one of the points that you were trying to make?
Yeah, that's the, and it's here.
So you could get rid of the portables, you're saying?
That's
And
right.
we would be okay?
So I'll give you a really good example. There is a very old and outdated portable on the Prescott campus. Everybody wants to get rid of it. It is falling apart, and it is definitely something that it could easily be removed, and we're planning on doing that within the playground project that's going to be planned there, right? But it does add to the capacity. So when you're looking at Prescott it shows that it has one more classroom that is truly viable to have. You know where the old portables are in the district because you know them when you see them. You can tell the age and the vintage of them. And this chart shows you, within the lifespan is 25 years. So like when you're green, about half of our portables are within the lifespan. And some of the feedback we've got is, break that out a little bit more. 25 years is a pretty big gap. If most of them are 20 years. That means in 5 years, they're going to be beyond their lifespan. But you can see that, there are some that are well beyond, there's 77 portables that are beyond their lifespan, that are over 30 years old. And so we're going to be, there's definitely some portables, I know where they're located, that are over 50 years old. Most of the portables that we demoed at the Ralph Bunch campus were all well over 45, 50 years old.
So this is a minutia question, but it just popped in my head. Is the one of the sorting mechanisms, are you going to be able to see what each school's capacity is? Okay, the portable and permanent. It's going to be split out
That's right.
that way.
It will
Okay.
absolutely be split out that way.
So you're going to be able to see the sort by small schools, frankly.
Yep.
So, and then you could sort on top of that the condition of that small school, so you could decide.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
I do have one question. So this is going back to, it's slide 36, on deferring maintenance, leading to higher costs. So I understand that concept, but what then is the sort of practical solution around that? What am I supposed to be reading between the lines here?
Practical. Problematic, I would say, is probably a better word, is that, I think the Oakland Unified School District is absolutely, it's an amazing blessing that the voters support the bond program, because without the bond program, the condition of so many aspects of our buildings would not be addressed. So we're playing from behind is what it's saying, right? And that's where prioritization really comes in, because clearly one of the systems on here is HVAC. So you have a tremendous dilemma in terms of, you have boilers that are over 100 years old, cast iron boilers that are in some of our schools right now providing heat during the winter months, right? All plumbing infrastructure and all those things, right? You have to maintain that while also going to the next generation of heat pumps and things like that are going to provide both heating and cooling. So the point here is that you have to have a plan and strategy around these facilities to address them, right? Even though Parker is a building that we are leasing out, and it's a pretty amazing story of how we've been able to transform a school to be, and that's an asset management strategy. The roof still will need to get replaced at a certain point. The boiler will need to get replaced, and there are ongoing costs. And I do think that, to me, there's multiple layers to that. One, you need to have a strategy. One, which schools you invest in matters, right? And then which are the schools that have different types of systems that maybe cost less, that you can upgrade them. But it is if you don't invest in it, I think this is the biggest thing that I would say is the biggest takeaway around it. When the board is under financial challenges, which they are back in that position right now, and it's cyclical, the thing that gets compromised is deferred maintenance on your facilities, because you can pay for it out of the general fund and the routine maintenance program that's mandated by state. And the reason why it's mandated by the state is during the Great Recession, a lot of districts just stopped investing in maintenance. And they said, no, you have a minimum 3% of your expenditures that you have to invest in the maintenance of your facilities. The second is the deferred maintenance fund, and the third is your bond program. So it does take all three of those to maintain facilities, and you could see the deferred maintenance. When you do an aerial view, this is the thing that's the most interesting to me. When you do aerial views of campuses, you can tell which roofs are really, really old and need to be replaced. And there's a team of 4 roofers that go around patching those up as much as they can. And that's a reality when you see the stained tiles on, ceiling tiles, and, that's a reality of the infrastructure that you have in the district. So there's not an immediate answer other than to say it's really critical that we prioritize our dollars and make sure we're spending them in the right places. And that's why I do appreciate the question that you have about the unused asset on the first floor of, the Marcus Foster building. What's the plan for that, right? because that was the board adopted design that was created. But we do need to have a plan for that, because that is an asset that can be utilized. We just didn't have the money at the time to complete that.
On the comment here, when it's 1 million proposed, is that with the budget cut is being proposed to take 2 million out of that?
That is in the budget. When the board passed the deferred maintenance policy, I was here in this room that night that it passed. The commitment was 7 million in the deferred maintenance fund. Immediately on the same night, there was another item that said they only had enough money to fund it at 5. So then it was 5 million moving forward. When the blueprint came through and there was the school consolidations that were proposed, there was a series of school consolidations. The district had to make concessions in the deferred maintenance fund, lowered it down to 3. And so we've been working with the 3 million over the last couple of years and, supplementing that where we can. The current proposal that is in the board packet around scenario 3 includes only 1 million in deferred maintenance.
And it sounds it's not enough.
It-
Not.
It is that's the scope and scale of it is what's important. The good news is that in draw 3 and draw 4, there is funding for deferred maintenance that is within the bond program, but that is an important consideration for
So,
facilities at large.
so what are funding ramifications if somehow the board passes the 1 million? Because the way I understand it, you're basically not in compliance at the state level. There's a ramification of basically having so little money in. Is that right?
So there's two spots. Yes, and like in the state mandated 3%, that is your routine maintenance,
Yes.
that funds your buildings and grounds department, that does the repairs around the district. You do have to maintain 3%, or you become ineligible for some of the state funding in Proposition 2. Because Proposition 2 is essentially, it's a contract with school districts to say, if you invest, we will provide grants and we will provide reimbursement for your facilities. So that is the threshold, and you have to have a deferred maintenance. You have to have a facilities master plan that includes all the data that we're including, and you also have to have a comprehensive maintenance plan that will come after this. Those are the requirements. For the deferred maintenance, it is up to the Fund 14, it is up to the discretion of the school board as to how they invest in that.
So I'm just gonna make one more comment before. So to me, in some ways, this is the most important slide in the whole package, because the bond has to address deferred maintenance, because it is a modernization item, really, and thermal comfort, if we did it at every school in the district, I don't know what that number would be, but it's going to be, I'm just guessing, $150 million of a bond. Yeah, 200 million. So, yeah, it's going to be a big number, but to me, if you were to have a good presentation that showed what this would look like, even in a 3D model for PR and all that, you could pass a bond just if people understood that thermal comfort was going to be taken care of as quickly as possible in every school in the whole district. So, yeah.
Okay, last chance, last questions for Preston? All right. We have kind of a little mini plan here for the follow-up. I guess for the next item?
Yes, but for the record, I will state that there are no public comments just for this item, Chair.
Okay. We have G2 260044. This is on the committee vacancies. We have them.
Yeah, we have them.
And what do we want to do about them? So, in passing, unrelated to this, the parliamentarian also mentioned to me that the audit committee is needing people as well for the school. So, are there any thoughts to share at this point? We're going to bring one person additionally coming next month, and then we can have more conversation on that, I guess.
So I'm just going to say, I think if any committee member knows someone that would be interested and has the capacity and the time to take on this, please get them in contact with, I think, Viola, which express to them further what this looks like and what the commitment would be, and then how they apply. It is online, but I still think some folks, so that's my suggestion,
Okay,
everyone on the committee.
okay.
It's a fun party, man.
Yeah, yeah. It's gonna
Not
get
to be
more fun,
missed.
too.
Hang out with David.
Yeah.
That's right, hang out with David. Corey. On item H,
Just
Okay.
real quick for that item, G.-2, there are no public commenters for that item. Chair.
we do?
We have none.
We have none, okay. For the next item, then, we have public comments on all non-agenda items within the subject matter jurisdiction of the committee. Do we have any?
Uh, There are no public commenters for public comment on non-agenda items, Chair.
Okay. All right. Then we come to item I, right? Introduction of new legislative manner. Yes, sir.
So we still have then a list. Sounds like from the conversation here today that we want to have a conversation about coal here at this committee, right? That looks at, say again what it would look at.
I mean, it's just, I wanted just to report on what it is permitted for, what the status of the permit is, and also an update on the expenditure sheets. And I feel like all the major projects that we get the expenditure sheets on, that should be a standing item that's on for every meeting, and whether we discuss it or not, it just so we can get the report, so we can see.
We can ask
And
for
I-
that, David, with you when we meet.
And
with
I'm
you,
going to give
right?
an
Just
example.
make it a standing report.
Yeah, I'm going to give an example. On Wednesday night's meeting, there's an item for coal for an additional 200,000 and something for the emergency generator. There's a change order on the Wednesday night meeting. And so I believe they need an emergency generator, but, you know, that's a change to the spending plan. So,
Yeah, that's right.
yeah, so I think that whether it's Garfield or McClymonds, all the schools that we're asking for major, we need to get them as a standing item.
Okay.
Okay, that sounds good.
We also want an asset management report. Really want the state of the current round of work that the consultants are doing, the feasibility analyses that they're undertaking, I think for 3 sites. I can't remember now if it's 3 or 2.
It's Bunch, Lakeview, and 1025.
Thank you. And, yeah, what the status of that is and how that's being conducted, so. How are they investigating those 3 analyses? So that's another one. And then finally, I want to report on the demo at 1025, and what is particularly what are the, there's a word for it, but basically the permitting and entitlements to do that. What are the barriers? What do we have to do? What do we think we have to do with CEQA, with historic? All just a kind of I forget there's a term, but a timeline of all the ducks that have to get in a row, all the dominoes that have to fall before that happens.
Am I correct that in the language in which we last described 1025, I think prior to that, reading that, I had assumed that the board was full speed ahead on the demolition of 1025, but the last language suggested that there was doubt, that they were still contemplating portions of those two buildings to be rehabbed. Was sort of like the language was left kind of vague? Or is it, you could update us now, maybe even before we leave.
I don't mind if it's appropriate to provide an update. So there's a definite nexus between the feasibility study and the demolition resolution. So the demolition resolution that was brought forward, you do need to declare for the city some future use of the building. And it points to the feasibility study as the study that would provide potential future uses. And there's two types. One is an interim use, which is how might the property be used in the interim for a longer-term facility project. So for example, there's workforce housing, there's affordable housing, and there's T-Hub supports that are listed as the named types of supports that are there. To actually construct that and put together the funding stack that would be necessary takes between 5 and 8 years, right? So during that time, there may be an interim use that's used. So that's the information that would be utilized, but the intent, the resolution is clear around the intent to demolition both of the red tagged buildings.
So, I want to.
You want a formal report on that?
Yeah.
Okay.
We're happy to do it.
I'm aware that we have the facilities master plan on the next meeting. Maybe we can streamline some of what we do based on our ad hoc committee, I don't know, or subcommittee, I don't know.
Yeah.
But
To have some
I
time
think,
for this
I mean,
conversation.
I take some responsibility for this as too, but I have had the experience of asking for things to be on the agenda for 6-7 months in a row. And I really want us not to have that experience. So,
Okay.
Yeah, and I'll work with you all, because I also know there are going to be a couple of other major things that we plan to bring to you guys that next month that are going to require your attentiveness, yes, and time. So we'll figure out in the meeting on how we want to allocate the time. We will bring these items, but we'll definitely want to stay the timepiece.
Right.
To make sure that you
That's right,
guys,
too.
because there's things that we know that we want to bring to you that you guys would definitely want to make sure that we have come your way.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, a lot of things are coming up. Okay, let's see.
There are no public commenters for this item, Chair.
All right, very good. So, can we unanimously agree to adjourn at 8:36 this evening? Okay, so done.
I want to go.
Thank you very much. Thanks, everybody.